Senator Bay.
Acting Deputy President, this evening I had the pleasure of watching and learning and listening as Treasurer Scott Morrison brought down the economic plan for Australia for the next 4 years and beyond. And of course it lays the path, Acting Deputy President, for an election which will take place on the 2nd of July of this year, and it could not be more now in contrast the choice that Australians have between a government led by Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, a man who of course was a visionary in his business life prior to politics, a man who is an outstanding leader as Prime Minister of Australia, and the alternative choice of a gentleman by the name of Mr Bill Shorten, who by his own recent statement said, if I gain Prime Ministership, if I get to lead this country, I will lead it as I have led the union movement. And for those who are in any doubt as to Mr Shorten's track record in terms of leading his union and the union movement generally, they need look no further than the recent Royal Commission into union corruption. Acting Deputy President, there are three real platforms upon which the coalition government will go into the 2016 election. They are growth in the economy, jobs, building on the 300,000 jobs that the coalition has created in the time it's been in government, and investment. Growth, jobs and investment. But let me point out to those who might be interested the fundamental difference between our two political philosophies. The philosophy of the coalition is that of promoting the individual. The coalition will ask and will continue to ask the individual what it is they want, what is standing in their road for their own personal improvement and for their progression, and we will continue to develop policies that will allow individuals to reach their maximum potential. As opposed to that, our political opponents, the Labor Party, should they win government, will return to the collectivism which has been the principle of the Labor Party since its inception. In other words, the Labor Party will continue to tell people what it is that is good for them, and it will get about the process of socialising to achieve it. If I can return for a moment, Acting Deputy President, to the first of those three principles, and that of growth. The best predictor of future performance and future behaviour is always past behaviour. It is the only predictor of future performance or future behaviour. And of course, when we look at growth, I would point immediately to the excellence of our recent Trade Minister, Mr Andrew Robb, who in his time as Minister, building on a career of some 40 years, I must say, the absolute zenith of his career has been to gift to the Australian people not one, not two, but three free trade agreements with three of our best and longest trading partners, being Japan, South Korea and China. Those three free trade agreements now in place are already having an amazing effect and will continue to have an incredible effect on this country's well-being, its economic well-being, its employment opportunities well into the next 30 or 40 years. And Acting Deputy President, whilst it's possible to reflect on the value of the FTAs in goods and commodities, I want just for one moment to mention the question of the value of services in the free trade agreement, particularly with China. It is the case at this moment, as Senator McGrath knows only too well, that the services sector only contributes 17% of our net export wealth. China, for reasons best known to itself, values highly Australia's services sector, our prudential regulation, our capacity, for example, with services such as health, with aged care, with architecture, with building, with construction, with mining. If it is possible for us to increase the component of export income for this country from services from 17 to 34%, Acting Deputy President, the value to this country, to the young people, those now in school, those going through university, those who are seeking employment in the professions, in the trades, the value to this country and to our young people will be massive. It is the case that the Labor Party has supported the development of and the signing of those free trade agreements, and I congratulate and I acknowledge the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Wong, for her consideration in the way in which those negotiations have taken place. But I also say that we are moving to the opportunity of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in which we can not only open up our relationship further with Asia, with countries such as Vietnam, but particularly with North and Central and South America, because the TPP gives us access to countries such as Mexico, Chile and Peru. And you and I, Acting Deputy President, participated in a Senate inquiry last year into the potential for Australia's further relationships with Mexico, marking, as it does this year, the 50th anniversary of our relations with that country. I could talk at length, of course, about the value to agriculture, to agricultural exports from the free trade agreements and the TPP, the value to our mining services sector, because it is known internationally the excellence with which Australia undertakes its mining, its hard rock mining, and of course its oil and gas activities. If I turn to the second of those pillars, employment, Acting Deputy President, and just focus on one principle that was presented to us tonight by the Treasurer in the budget statement, and that is the Youth Jobs Path. This absolutely visionary concept that has been developed by the Treasurer and by the Employment Minister, Minister Cash, a program that prepares, that trials and hires young people. And I was very proud this evening to listen to the fact that some $840 million is being invested towards the opportunities for permanent employment for some 120,000 young people under the age of 25 years, a program in which the funding from the Work for the Dole scheme can follow that young people into an apprenticeship or into an internship, whereby they can work with an employer. The employer will top up that wage, give them the opportunity to develop those skills that we all know are so necessary for a young person to develop employment opportunities, and then, at the end of that process, hopefully, should they have worked themselves into an employment job, then to get it, and again the employer will receive support financially under this scheme, or in fact to move to a different form of employment, but to get them off that shocking process of long-term unemployment, which we cannot afford to have in our country if we are to achieve the enormous benefits that the economic plan outlined by Scott Morrison this evening will be realised in this country. Acting Deputy President, I turn to the third of those principles, growth, jobs and investment. And I talk about overseas investment in this country, and we have seen this evening the actions that will be put into place by this government to ensure that those who earn income in Australia, be they Australian companies or offshore companies, will pay tax. But we need that $200 billion of investment that we currently have in the oil and gas sector, principally offshore my own state of Western Australia, but also Queensland and elsewhere. But I talk also about the need and the opportunity for investment by Australians. And that is why it is so disappointing that Mr Shorten has indicated with his economic team that he will impact severely on negative gearing. Not only, Acting Deputy President, for those people, middle and other income earners, who use negative gearing on property, but the actions of this government, of this Labor Party, should they win government, would also be to impact on negative gearing for shares and for business start-ups. In other words, the exact opposite of what we need in this country. The Coalition wants to encourage investment. It wants to back winners. The Labor Party wants to put shackles around them. And of course, added to that insult of reducing negative gearing on existing properties and on other investment forms, the Labor Party, should it win government, wants to add another shackle to investment in business in this country, and that is to double the capital gains tax. Acting Deputy President, 6 points were outlined this evening by Treasurer Morrison, and I want to finish on them. Firstly, an innovation and science program to start up businesses, a defence plan for high-tech manufacturing and technology, export trade deals to generate new business, tax cuts and incentives for small business, a sustainable budget for crackdowns on tax avoidance, and the guaranteed funding for health education and roads. I commend the
Senator
budget.
Back, your time has elapsed.